Every parent I know with a kid with disabilities has different challenges, different medical needs, emotional, psychological. It's finding those golden nuggets to exploit
Yeah.
and staying positive in the family because it can be totally overwhelming. But the more resources you have to scaffold those services around that kid and family, it's only going to help everybody.
This is the Unspecial podcast. Today I'm joined with Angelina, and she is a wealth of information when it comes to advocacy and finding services for your children. Thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, so Unspecial essentially is a space for parents and special needs kids to be heard, supported, equipped, and inspired. I believe in the power of story, and everybody's on such a powerful journey, and everyone has a story, and I think we can all benefit and learn from. And yeah, why don't you tell me about yourself?
Well, just like what you're talking about as a journey, mine's been a journey. I was originally from Australia and moved all over the world. Was lucky enough to live and experience all many places of the world, including Canada, Mexico, Switzerland, Hong Kong, all of that. But from that, had a clothing business of my own in Australia when I was 16. But my father was in the computer industry, and that's why we moved all over the world. And so I grew up with both sides already having had a business, but also having my father in the computer industry when it was getting off the ground in like 70s and 80s. And so anyway, from that, moved to California and moving further along, married. And New Year's Day, 1997, January 1st, 1997, I had Tyler, my son Tyler. I also have a daughter 3 years older. And Tyler, when he was born, I noticed something not quite right and said to the doctors, and the doctors were in denial. No, it's just a newborn little baby. His ears are probably filled with fluid or he can't really see you. And I said, no, I want this kid checked out from head to toe. And every single test came back bad. We're talking eyes, ears, heart, kidneys, neuromuscular, skeletal, you name it. Everything was in the wrong place or wrong. So this is back in 1997 when uh, genetics isn't where it is today with genetic sequencing. And from me
Hmm.
being in the computer industry, then I went into the software industry. I knew a lot about genetics and sequencing and medical and biotech software. Helped write AI tools for neurologists at Stanford and UCLA. Had a company in Silicon Valley. We took public, but beyond that, I sort of had the fast forward, had to learn a lot about medical, but I had a lot of the background from biotech software, what was possible. Anyway, every test came back, and back then they couldn't identify it genetically. We didn't have Illumina where it was today or anything like that, or Craig T. Ventnor, which is down the street from me, where all of the biotech and genetics work happens.
Hmm.
And back then, they really only had the genetic sequencing for a few different types of syndromes, the major ones. Well, after that, I ended up taking Tyler up to Stanford Genetics. And there's a powerhouse woman up there, Dr. Luann Hudkins. And about 3 or 4 years, very hard having a kid not diagnosed because you don't really know how to treat something if they're not diagnosed. So he's blind in one eye, no optic nerve behind the left eye. Both eyes have strabismus and nystagma, but also rare corneal growths that no one, adult or pediatric corneal specialist, could identify. And I only have one eye to save. So it's a little hard to identify to understand what to do when you don't know what it is. And he also was born, deaf in both ears and had 8 subsequent ear surgeries and then had his ear canal rebuilt when he was about 15. And he wears 2 hearing aids. We couldn't get the hearing back in the left ear. And now his right ear is declining, so he wears hearing aids and has since he was about 3 years old. And he had heart surgery at 3 months because he had a coarctation of the aorta. And he also has a bicuspid aortic valve. Your aortic valve has 3 leaflets, he only has 2. So leaking and bleeding and pumping the blood in at the wrong angle. So all these things. So we had to, can't say we didn't fix the aortic valve at that point because you don't want to, because you want to hang on as long as you can, because whether it's a human valve or a pig valve, they only last a decade and you got anti-rejection drugs. So all of those were considerations. So we have to monitor that carefully. And then as the hospital was doing all their checks, we're like doing ultrasounds at every test possible. I'm like, what is that? Well, turns out it was horseshoe kidneys. So they're co-joined, straddling the spine below the rib cage. So they're in the wrong place and they're joined. So if anything happens to his kidney, can't take one out. And his feet are misshapen, deformed. They're bean shaped, very, very high. It's called pes cavus, very high arches. Both knees are bad as well. That's neuromuscular skeletal issues. And during his various surgeries, he's now had 23 surgeries and he's 28 years old. Major surgeries, not minor. Just
Wow.
had his second giant abdominal surgery here at Scripps in San Diego, where we were meant to be in for a day, ended up being in a week because for 3 days they couldn't stop the bleeding in his abdomen, and they did 3 emergency surgeries in the
Gosh.
hospital room, and he coded, transfusion, the whole bit. He nearly died. And so we've been through 23 major surgeries. And when he grew up to about, I don't know, 12, when boys start growing, 14, he was complaining his feet hurt. And I'm like, don't you dare go complaining about anything. I'm tough as nails on him and treat him like his sister. And
Yeah.
he said, my feet hurt. Get all his feet x-rayed and find out all the bones in his feet are fused. So we then had to have major surgery to take fat from his butt, and he's very skinny, so it's hard to find fat, and broke all the bones and put fat between all of the toes and the bones in his feet. That only bought us some time because he still needs his arches and heels broken. And so it's just one thing after another of keeping up with surgeries and maintenance. And that's what I would preach to parents about ongoing maintenance, because with Kabuki kids, there's only 378. He was identified at 3 years. I took him to Stanford genetics. That woman actually identified the Kabuki gene with the University of Washington, probably about 10 years ago now, or maybe 15. Time flies. But as soon as it was identified, we did his gene sequencing and the blood work and confirmed he had Kabuki syndrome. Very rare. The mutation of the gene he has is so rare it's actually never been seen before in literature. So doesn't help us with anything actually, because there's no one
Gosh.
else in the world with it. So they did do muscle and tissue biopsies and tests while he was under one of his surgeries, and it came back his tissue and muscles are abnormal. So that doesn't tell us anything because no one's got that either. So we know all these things, but it's all behind, and because there's only 378 people in America with it and 1,078 in the world, there's no money to be made in research really, or a drug, or Johns Hopkins does some research. There were no support groups or anything like that when he was born, but there's Johns Hopkins is doing some of that research because from a genetic standpoint, I've always wondered, can we, with CRISPR, can we go in while the baby's in utero to genetically change some of these defects, or do we wait till the baby's born and attack each of the areas and fix them all, which is what I've been doing since he was born.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I take him to 13 specialists on an ongoing basis, and he's had all the surgeries. He's had both knees completely broken and rebuilt because the tissue is very lax and his patellas float off to the side. He's torn ligaments, tendons, cartilage. So he's had both knees rebuilt, both feet broken, heart surgery, two abdominal surgeries, 8 ear surgeries. He's had both eyes operated on. We go to Children's Hospital Los Angeles because they're the only rare growth corneal specialists familiar with Kabuki on the West Coast. And so I found the best specialists for each of these areas, given the challenging situation. And there's good and bad doctors at every hospital. So I'm very, really good at getting medical reports, finding the right specialists and the care. So, like, just this month, we have 3 cardiac appointments, imaging appointments. We have nephrology appointments. Yesterday, we were at the orthotics appointment for custom orthotics for his feet. We were at the foot surgeon before that. It's ongoing, and it's a parent's commitment once you have a child like this. But
Yeah.
this is not preaching poor me, or anything. From this, I learned a lot and realized, okay, I'm working with all these hospital systems. And while this is happening, I'm also working with him through school. And I realized, oh, there's special ed that's attached to this. And I became very aware of all the special ed relationships with the county supervisors, the district, the special ed teachers, and very adept at creating and writing goals for IEPs. And other parents start asking me for help.
Mm.
So for the last 29 years, I have now merged those things with my
Hmm.
ability of knowing about healthcare software, the healthcare systems, the school systems. But then as the kids get older, also the burden of the cost of this for parents. I've worked with Social Security. They have a program called the PASS Plan, which people don't even know about, which I'll get into later.
Hmm.
IH, in-home support services. So there's funding that can be out there for families. So the first thing I'd say to families when they reach out and they have a child in the situation, there's eligibility criteria for all the different services. No one will get everything, even with applications to everyone. You have to fit the criteria and eligibility. But in California, we're lucky to have the regional center. There's the San
Hmm.
Diego Regional Center, there's Inland Empire, there's up in the Bay Area, Ventura. They're all over California, but they're only funded by the state, not federal. And they've been amazing for me and my clients. They only have like a criteria of intellectual deficiency, autism. They've got like, if for example, if you have like spina bifida and you're confined to a wheelchair, but you completely have all your mental faculties, that's not eligible. They're
Really?
really about people with intellectual deficits, seizures, things like that. So there's only about five criteria, but I've managed to get a lot of people eligible through the intellectual deficit piece. Very good at
Uh,
building the case, getting the medical records, doing the interviews, prepping the families to be able to get that. I typically they have providers with services that they could scaffold around the person for the rest of their life. So I've typically gotten about $200,000 per year for the rest of their life in services. And then you work on quarterly meetings, annual meetings, because people age, their medical changes, their goals change. And so I engage parents even when the baby's 3, because they have early intervention, early start programs, get them into
right.
the regional center ASAP. But you've got to follow up, make sure you've got all the medical to back it up. um, you're eligible for the regional center if those criteria happen before you're 18, but it really is good if you start as early as possible. And then I have the regional center involved while they're going through school. And it helps to have a neuropsych eval done because the regional center will want that. And that's how you can overrun the school if the school's not giving you the right services,
Yep.
because they have school therapists, but not neurologists doing psych evals. So they do a lot of overlapping tests, but the neuros at the hospitals bring more to the table. So you've got a delicate balance. You've signed up for the regional center. You've also now take all that to get the services for your child, because if they have an intellectual deficit, they're going to learn differently. If they have a seizures, they're going to change. They're going to learn differently. So from that, I involved the school early on, and we get a thing called an IEP or a 504 plan. IEP means individual education program, or a 504 is for somebody high functioning, doing well in school, but maybe they have really bad ADHD, anxiety, depression, all that, and it is impacting their access to education. So there's
Hmm.
two areas there. I go after both of them. I obviously want to get the IEP with the detailed goals and as much support as possible for my students. So that happens all the way through high school. And as you're going to grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, I have the regional center re engaged, because once we get the coverage from the regional center, early start program is, are the kids making the right goals at the right time? Did they crawl at the right time? So when they're young, but as they're going through, maybe they're severe and the parents need like a date night. There's things that the regional center will do. It's called respite, to give the parents a break. If the kid's in grade 10 or 11 and maybe wanting to do vocational school, we can work with the regional centers in conjunction with Department of Rehab. So I work with them. What are the kids' goals? What's the kid what's their passion? What could they possibly do? Because the last thing I hate seeing when parents come to me and the kid's 27, 28 years old, they didn't finish school, the kid's doing nothing at home. Now that's going to really be an emotional problem for the child. Their self-worth, their lack of esteem. They're doing nothing, not even a basic job. And the parents now are getting older going, what do I do with my child? And so I've seen that many times with families, and it really breaks my heart. So you have to be proactive. So you're working the school with the IP and the 404, 504 services, and you're working the regional center at the same time in conjunction, to the point, are they going to be diploma bound or certificate bound? Schools by law have to give them for free public access to education, but not every school's the same, and they don't all have the same services. And, a lot of my parents, with the kids are on IEP, there's a thing called fundamentals. They have resource rooms. They have scaled down curriculum depending on what the kids' needs are. So there's ways to get them through school I try to push for, a diploma, but if it's certificate bound, there's different routes. And then there's things, if they're very severe, called the transitional program with schools, where, kids can go for up till 21 and they
Hmm.
get them out into the community. And that's a different path. But you want to make sure you know every option, ask every question. And you can have the regional center present at those school meetings in grade 10, 11, and 12 because you're trying to plan for the future of your child and have all the resources you possibly can get. And from there, there's a program I helped start a long time ago called College to Career Program. So, in thinking of the kids leaving school and what program, what do you do? What's their direction? And they take about 20 to 25 kids, they interview them to be appropriate, they hand hold them through college. Now, in San Diego, that College to Career program where it started is only San Diego City College, Mesa College, and Miramar College, but they handhold these kids and work with the counseling department. And you know what? After
Wow.
1 or 2 semesters, these kids are completely self sufficient. They know their way
Yeah.
around campus. They know how to advocate for themselves. They know I have when they transition from school with the regional center from an IEP, that document then turns into an IPP document, independent personal program. Same idea, shows the goals, what are their accommodations, what they had in school, and now they get in college. So you make a continuous program here as they go through life. So you get them into college, you should see them blossom and advocate for themselves. And my son did all of this as well. And at the same time, you're working with a regional center, but also they have vendors with the regional center. And maybe your kid likes gardening. Maybe your kid likes video film editing. You never know what a kid can shine at. And somebody sees disabilities and maybe then they don't realize. In the college to career program, I knew a kid that wheelchair bound, very, very, very Asperger's, not a great communicator. He's already selling his apps on the App Store. That's how gifted he is at programming.
Wow.
And went through the program. He's got a job. He's programming.
Yeah.
I have another kid that very Asperger's as well. Not won't look you in the eye, but he's about 7 foot tall. He's very, very aware of his height and being awkward. And I assumed when I talked to the mom that he just finished high school because I just met him. And he's sitting at home doing nothing. And he's like 24, 25 years old. So I sit down, meet with him, and I'm wanting to know his background. And he's like, I said, well, what have you been doing? Because he's doing nothing at home for the last year and a half.
Uh-huh.
And again, that's going down a route I hate to see.
Yep.
Turns out he's got a double degree from UCSD in like biomedical engineering and something else. And I'm like,
Smokes.
what? And I said to him, so why did you do these degrees? He goes, oh, just because university was close. Wrong answer. No idea why, how to sell yourself. Family
Uh-huh.
didn't know what to do. So I reached out to my contacts at all the labs at UCSD up here. And within 10 days, I had him a job in a lab and
Wow.
uh, found his passion because there's labs that specialize in all sorts of things down here. And he's working, but I had to really help him and groom him. Not that I'm an employment specialist, but it
Yeah.
was a continuum how to get him happy in life, self esteem, and set him up, and how to interview, and how to present yourself, and how to be punctual and not whine about what you're doing, no matter what they tell you to do in the lab. Anyway, he's doing great. So, out of this, all these years, I've been doing the IEPs at school, fighting for services, but working with when the kid starts working at 18, help them with the Social Security application to get benefits. And that's what you briefly mentioned earlier. What ticked me off was they can only ever have $2,000 in their bank account or they lose some of their benefits.
2000?
That's it. You can't go over 2,000 bucks. I'm like, you're making these people live in poverty.
Uh-huh.
And if they try to earn more, the benefits go down. They don't know the intricacies of the issue with this. So and I'm thinking that's disgusting. So I've got a pretty good relationship with the Social Security officers around here. I said, this is disgusting.
Hmm.
So, and then I also hated it where poor families have to create a trust to try and put assets inside a trust so it doesn't look like it's not assets that they can see. But the Social Security hates reviewing every trust because they're all different. And
Hmm.
that's all they had to work with. So from that, I also, made the case that they're going to have bigger medical bills than a regular person, and they also aren't going to have this higher earning power as a normal person either. So
Hmm.
This is to me discrimination.
Yeah.
So I had known about 10 years ago or 8 years ago about ABLE accounts in two other states, and that was it many years ago. So I researched them and went to Social Security, told them about this, and they were intrigued, but no one was doing anything about it. Then I reached out to a couple of congressmen up in Sacramento, and I said, we're authoring a bill up so we can create this ABLE account called Cal ABLE, which we authored it, we got it passed, and it's up and running. I did the
Wow.
RFP for the software because of my software background. What do I want in this program if I am a person with disabilities, but I know software, what's workable in a bank software? And we issued the RFP, got the vendors to answer it. We got up and running, and it's been successful ever since. So we just
Wow.
did a second RFP to change bank vendors because they have like 5 or 7 year rule, and then they have to change vendors. But it's up and running. They have hundreds of millions in assets, lots and lots of clients. So to me, I don't want to say incompetence, there's a lack of communication between the agencies. Social Security doesn't know what the regional center does. Regional center doesn't know what Social Security is doing. Same with Department of Rehab. They don't talk to one another. So down here in San Diego, when I got CalAble up and running, I went to Social Security, trained them in it. Now they actually have a CalAble specialist that goes all over the country
Wow.
training. I said, every one of your clients, you should be handing them the brochure of CalAble
Yeah.
because every one of them, is a fit if they have disabilities. So they
Uh-huh.
do that now. And then I went
Okay.
to the regional center, did the same thing, went to IHSS, did the same thing. Now they all talk to one another. They never did. This needs to happen across the whole entire US. This is not happening.
Amazing.
And Department of Rehab, same thing. College to career, same thing. Trained them all, got them talking. So if I have a case with a particular client that crosses 3 or 4 agencies, I have them all on the same email communicating. That
Okay.
doesn't happen. And
Wow.
parents don't know how to do it and how to access it. This way, if there's a change in goals or we're starting them to go to work, we get CalAble set up, we talk to Social Security. Then this brings in another thing. There's a thing called the PASS plan. No one knows what it is. It's through Social Security.
Uh-huh.
If a kid is going to college, has goals, has good transcripts, and has a passion where they want to work or how they want to work, the PASS plan for my son, for example, bought his heavy duty laptop for video film editing. They bought his heavy duty cameras, lenses. They pay for his Uber rides because he's blind and can't drive, lunches while he's at work. All of this is with the goal of long term that we want him to get through college with a goal and go get a job and be self sufficient. So we're moving people through the pipe so that they're providers in the community and they are healthy, working, and they're going to be contributors to society. So people don't know about this plan, but you work with Department of Rehab as well in the little triangle or the circle. And there's a thing called Ticket to Work. And you have to have this between Department of Rehab and Social Security and the regional center because the Ticket to Work helps them basically tick the right box so you get you apply for the pass plan, but it also engages Department of Rehab to help you find jobs, to help with your resume, what do you want to do. So beyond that, the regional center and Department of Rehab, they will have vendors, and my son is loves video film editing and all of that, and he works with all the programs to do it. So we found a vendor that's through the regional center called Options for All. Their whole thing is about video film, getting
Hmm.
kids into jobs and training for video film. But this isn't all in different areas. Through Options for All, we did they put on a day, it was like speed dating. NBC, CBS, ABC, Spectrum, Cox, you name it. They were all in one big room together. They did presentations. They had people representing the disability organizations from Washington, D.C. at this meeting as well. And they had Zoom presentations from like a blind woman that's on Broadway in New York. They had a quadriplegic guy he's a film producer in another city, all presenting, all of them showing what can be possible in their particular industry. And from that, and you have your resume, your portfolio, they interview, they only have 20 candidates for that day. And from that, my son he's got a job with Cox Communications, doing video film editing, making their TV commercials, doing all the posting, their social media. It's part time, which worked great because all through university, He worked at Cox Communications and he's finished college now for years and he still works part time as a contractor at Cox Communications. And it's phenomenal on your resume, but he's also learned a lot. Now, it's all about connections and your family reaching out to make those connections because the man from Cox, his son has disabilities, so he gets it. He
Yeah.
gets it. And amazing. So now my son handles Las Vegas, California, Nevada, all 3 or 4 states for their social media. They're posting, and if he's made commercials for TV. He goes to the NCCA, basketball events to interview
Yeah.
people, do the social media. I think this coming Friday, there's a Salute to Teachers thing, which every year where there's the best teachers, it's a big TV show. He's going to be doing all the interviewing and doing all the social media
Wow.
and interviews. So this grows your child with disabilities to get them to feel comfortable with themselves, go out there, speak up. You've learned something, and it's all about learning, 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 learning. And they will be able to, they're not going to make as much money as like my daughter is, but he is earning and has to do tax returns. That also understands how much money should be in his bank account. We know at the end of each month, transfer money out of Social Security. It's already an automatic transfer we can do, linked to your checking account, from your checking account from Social Security to CalAble.
To
So
Cal.
all of these things work together. And then from that, IHSS, easy for a parent to become a provider. It's like 1 or 2 hours of training online. There is background checks and all of that, but the parent can help be paid for the hourly work they do to help their child with disabilities.
What?
And if you have a very severe child, I mean, they could provide you a couple of 100 hours. There is a max per month. And if the parent can't do it, they have a list of qualified background check providers. But I've been my son's IHSS provider for years. The city, that he pays for that. He's been paid by Pass Plan. He gets his money from Social Security. And we've got the job at Cox. So you can see all the multiple areas of sourcing. The other thing, too, so it's not overwhelming for parents, because of that ticket to work between the regional center and Department of Rehab and Social Security, now that he's working, also we want to watch when he goes over the threshold of $1,500 something each month, because that's why it's important for you to document each month the expenses they have, because that lowers their income.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if they go over, that has to be documented because they call it a trial period. So there's all these details. Well, the key is, if you have Ticket to Work, there's companies out there that work with Social Security, and Social Security and Department of Rehab helped introduce us to the company that the lady handles the Ticket to Work to monitor. And we have a call with her
Wow.
every month
Huh.
to go through his pay stubs and his expenses to see that Social Security is doing the right thing.
Phew.
And it is what it is. If he goes over, well, he goes over, but we know what we're supposed to do. If he's under, but behooves the parents, you've got to do the expenses each month. And so I have him put everything on one credit card. He's got a debit card and he's got his credit card. But it's easy then. You just pull the 1 month of all of his charges. I highlight the Ubers, the lunches, anything to do with work. He bought, extra disc for his job. He had to buy cables, whatever. All of those are expenses. And so Security obviously has their details in their book of what the appropriate expenses are. But you get used to it, and it takes you 15 minutes every month. You move the money over, you do the expenses, you send the pay stubs to Social Security through a portal, and this is your routine.
Yeah.
So there's so many things. So in terms of all that I bring to the table, I bring these to my clients.
Uh-huh.
The other side of that is things don't always go well. For example, I've got clients where, I've got 3 ladies all with traumatic brain injury, ejected out of cars. They all live in a house together. They have no memory, so it's very difficult to train them in what they should be doing, because you could
Mm-hmm.
train them and then 15 minutes later they don't even know who you are. But
Mm-hmm.
25 years ago, their families all tried to get regional center funding and were all denied by an attorney. They had attorneys and they were all denied. About, I don't know, 3 years ago, I took over and put all the records together, prepared them. I finally got all of them regional center funding for the rest of their life, because it costs
Mm.
the families a fortune with the housing, caregivers 24/7. We're talking 3 and 4 or 5, 6 cycling caregivers, has to be 3 in the house all the time. And I got one-on-one support for all the ladies and day programs for all the ladies. behavioral therapy for all the ladies. All this costs money. What are you supposed to do? Families can't afford this.
No way.
And so they've been struggling with this for, the last 25 years. Anyway, we got them all covered, and there's still money to have the parents have to shell out, but this really helps the amount of money we were able to get for them.
Yeah.
But so, I've got other ones where people, as the person with disabilities, they get older, they get sick, they go to the hospital, and the regional center wouldn't let them back into the house where they had lived with the caregivers because they think that they have a higher level of care. So
Huh.
I worked doing appeals, working with Department of Developmental Services in Sacramento with a judge to fight it. Um, because there's a wonderful company I shout out for called Terry, Teri,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they have an amazing facility that they're building just south of Fallbrook,
So
San
nice.
Marcos Vista area. But they own 13 different residential houses and
Uh-huh.
different levels. They work with the regional center, they work with Medi-Cal, they work with Social Security, but sometimes it gets sticky. And if somebody's sick, gone to the hospital. This took this family before me. She'd been in the hospital 7 or 8 months. Well, Medi-Cal screaming, they want to get her out of the hospital, but regional center won't let her back into where she lived for 7 years. So there's so very, very tough situation. I put an appeal together. We were ready for the judge. I backdoored it in a way. I went to the very top of the regional center and the head of mediation, and I had a separate call by myself before the appeal. I got a resolution before the appeal. I always believe in any negotiation, you should reach out, have good communication, and
Yeah.
reach some form of a resolution negotiation before the phone call with the emotional family and the team and attorneys being brought in. So anyway, we settled it. She's moved back home and she's great. The appeal was closed and the judge and DDS are all happy because we came with a resolution that fit everybody.
Right.
Anyway, but so there's a lot of things to have a child with disabilities, a lot of resources out there. Things don't always go the way you want. I've got other kids where they're kidnapped out of Rady Children's Hospital with a transport and go to a residential facility in Utah
Wow.
and trying to fight to get any insurance because they're expensive. So there's so many resources. If we break down each of these providers and government resources, then the other side is me finding the right doctors for these families because everyone's got, they've got their different medical issues. And from the medical software side, it totally ticks me off that I can look out the window between UCSD and Scripps and they don't share medical records, and yet they say they have the best systems. There's only Epic and Cerner out there in terms of the two monopoly software. But as I like
Uh-huh.
to say, they're lipstick on a pig. They're really old software, and they put a pretty front end on it and resell it for millions. And they modify the hell out of it so two people with Epic actually can't share files. And that's how
Yeah.
it is.
We experienced that with some medical challenges with my wife. It started off at Scripps and then we got transferred to UCSD and they wouldn't share the MRI. And it took like 3 days. We were pressed for time. So I was calling Scripps. I drove down there, got to their records department. I'm like, give me the MRI. It all worked out, but it was definitely a frustrating
Well, to avoid
experience.
that, I tell all my clients, you own your own damn medical records. Who
Mm-hmm.
paid for them? You did.
Yep.
And so when you go to an imaging facility, I tell them when I walk in, I'm leaving here with the CD of my imaging because it's easy to get it the day of the service. So you are going to say, and they'll say, oh, it only takes 10 minutes to burn it. And I'm like, great, I'll wait. No matter how long it is, I'll wait. And I don't leave there without the CD. And then a few days later, you get the write up from the radiologist. And I have everything. So, because I might be going to three different specialists, you behind the counter at the imaging facility don't know that. And you don't
Mm-hmm.
really care. You're too busy. I said, but I've got to go to, I'm wanting three separate, separate opinions maybe. So I'm armed. Like my son had to just go to a foot surgeon the other day. And they're like, well, do you
Mm-hmm.
have any records? And I'm like, firstly, he's a Scripps patient. Why don't you look in the portal? And then two, can you access Radies? Three, can you access Children's Hospital Los Angeles? I said, hey, you've got great technology. No, we can't see any of that. And I said, why not? So I said, can you fax? I said, no one faxes today, get into the 21st century. And I said, and how do I fax imaging? So anyway, I said, the kids had 23 surgeries. I said, you just want like skeletal foot pieces. Otherwise, you'd have boxes of information because I keep everything. I walked in there with a pile over a foot high, CDs, imaging, everything of his feet. I walked into Scripps and they didn't even know what to do with it. And I said, I'll stand here. You can scan it all in. I will wait.
Yep.
They're like, we can't do all this right now. And I said, you don't understand how difficult this is. If I leave these here, I want one person to be responsible, and that is it. I will be back in 2 days picking them up. So you just have to be a little diplomatically aggressive. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how I got it. One person handled them. She reviewed them with a foot surgeon and they scanned in what was relevant. And a few days later, I picked them all up because I put the fear of God in them. I said,
Yeah.
it's too hard after the fact to go to medical records like you did to go get the information. Yeah, you can do it on their portal. 10 days later, maybe they send it. But it's hard for people. Not everyone can go into a portal. They don't know how to access it. They don't know how to get a medical release form. There's a lot of steps. So, from an imaging standpoint, I tell your viewers when you get imaging, you tell them up front, I'm leaving here with a CD,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? So that avoids the frustration you just talked about. And my clients are all like they feel empowered. But so I've got, clients to try and find them the right services, the right doctors. I've put people in with unusual doctors at Stanford, jumped through hoops because, they couldn't handle the paperwork and getting the medical. But then I've got the school side, and then I've got all the services from all the different various government agencies.
Yeah.
So it takes a village, which would be mom or the parents and the
Yep.
family. And especially if I have a good insurance broker. So always that's been an ugly hassle in California. A lot of insurance companies are either pulling out of California or raising their prices and providing less.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the hospitals are cutting the insurances and leaving people high and dry. So I always know an open enrollment is to be able to change insurance for families based on their difficulties or the challenges or the meds they're on because they cost a fortune. So that's another proactive thing you can do. What
What do you
questions do you
so?
have for me? I think I've talked your ear off.
No, no, it's all amazing. I mean, I can see why you got all these awards. Obviously, so you've been advocating for your son from such an early age. Yeah. So take me back to the early days. You said the day your son was born was the last day you cried. How would you speak to the? Obviously, it's such an emotional journey. So how do you do it all? How do you keep collected and fighting and positive?
Well, when all the tests came back, I booted everyone out of the hospital room, held him in a corner, and cried and went, "Oh my God, my life will never be the same."
Mm-hmm.
Realization stepped in. And I realized I'm fully responsible for him. He's tied to my hip. Every decision he ever wants to make, goes through me, even today. But everything is a learning thing, I've realized. And for kids with different intellectual disabilities, are they capable of certain things? Yes and no. But you work that out as you go through and having assessments. You realize if I teach this to my kid like 15 times over, maybe they'll learn it, or repetition. I mean, we went through 9 years of speech therapy 3 times a week because you wouldn't have understood him because of the structure of his mouth, his jaw, his upper roof palate, missing teeth, implants, jaw surgeries, braces, you name it. He's
Yeah.
got the $100,000 mouth. And
Uh-huh.
I had to force, and I realized, wow, I've got a jaw surgeon, I've got a maxillofacial surgeon, I've got an implant surgeon, I've got the dentist. I had 5 different mouth specialists that had to work in conjunction with one another because there's timings of all these different things. I can't put
Right.
implants in if I haven't opened the upper roof palate. There's all these different issues. So I'd go from the dentist one day to the orthodontist, then back to the dentist, then back to the jaw. So all of these different things that parents have to really, really be involved. He now has beautiful teeth because there's a lot of dental abnormalities for kids with Kabuki syndrome. And he's got implants. He had the narrow roof palate. He doesn't know where his tongue is in his mouth. And so the speech there, you wouldn't have understood him. He started with sign language, and I went, okay, no more sign language. You're going to learn to talk. And he's good. He's fine. He can communicate. Challenging with one eye to learn to read. Your eyes and your ears are your receptors to learn.
Uh-huh.
So that's very, very, very difficult. And so we through school, through his IEP, I got large print books. We're talking so large. I'll tell you a funny story. We were doing her homework. The books are huge. The books are massive, like massive big. Each book is a chapter in a regular book. So I
Oh wow.
got the books from the school. They're like, well, where's your car? And I'm like, what do you mean, where's my car? He said, well, it's going to come out in a big dolly. You won't be able to carry them all. I'm like, what? My entire trunk of my car, the boot of my car was filled. Anyway, we're doing homework in the kitchen one night, and my son Tyler moved the book sideways. I was also cooking dinner. The book's on fire because the quarter of it's over the range. We didn't know, but the book's so damn big and it was turned
Yeah.
sideways. Put it out, give it back to the school district. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's all burned on the end. They laughed about it. But you can get so many different things. The other thing too is again, because of software, I was working in the Bay Area, and there's a company called Bechtel. They do engineering and all that stuff, but they had a nonprofit on the side, and they have a really cool reading program for people with visual impairments. It's called Bookshare. So I
Okay.
worked out with them, and I said, school districts need to know about this, special ed needs to know about this, and same with senior care facilities, because either you can put it on your laptop or an iPad. And I know, like, elderly people in assisted living and all that sort of stuff, they've read every book that the assisted living place has, and they're crying out to read more books. And if their eyesight's failing, it can read to you. It can read in whatever voice, whatever speed. It can highlight the words. And like with my son's situation, because of the one eye, he has to have it reversed, like black background with white or bright print, because different people eyes need different things. So he
Hmm.
used Bookshare the whole way through school and college. If they don't have a book, you get the ISBN number from the school or whatever it is and give it to them, and they download the book and you had it. So now schools use Bookshare, and realize, my God, it's the largest digital library in the world. And they're
Okay.
fantastic. They're easy to work with. But most schools don't know about it, and parents don't know about it.
Hmm.
So it's phenomenal. And you get it, and you could get it paid for because it's a simple, cheap thing. But if you're in school, it's free. But if the I got the teachers at school to get it, and it's like $20 to download it or whatever. It's nothing.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing tool for you visually impaired kids and
What?
elderly. Um, anyway, so when I found out, with Tyler had all these issues, I had to examine from head. I literally said, start at the head, go to his feet, and said there was problems at every step of the way. Worked out what surgeries we needed right away because he needed heart surgery right away and ear surgeries.
So would they have sent you home if you didn't say anything?
Yep,
Wow.
yep. Because he looked like a little cute sleeping baby, and that's it. Yeah. So again, that's where I had to learn to fight from like the minute he was born. And I
Hmm.
realized, wow, I have to step up here. And that's when I started researching Kabuki. Well, actually, back then, there's a syndrome called Charge syndrome, CHARGE, and it stands for different things. That's actually what they thought he had because no one knew anything about Kabuki. It had never been found and discovered by that point. So they tried to fit him into whatever syndrome, but you couldn't check every box to say he had Charge syndrome, but that's all the genetics department knew.
Hmm.
So met with geneticists, neurologists, nephrologists, ophthalmologists, ear, nose, and throat, cardiologists, neuroskeletal muscular people, knee specialists, foot specialists. So it's all about education.
Yeah.
Education. Take notes when you go to a doctor's appointment. And again, ask every dumb question you possibly can because you don't know. You're learning. And in a way, when somebody has a kid with like only one thing to fix, I'm like, you have to be lucky. You should be so happy that. I mean, I see 13 specialists, 13 very separate, completely separate areas of the body. To lots of people would say they're not even related. Well, they are for Kabuki syndrome and other syndromes, but
Nice.
you only have to deal with going to a behavioral therapist for somebody with autism and behavioral issues. You're not
Right.
having a bunch of surgeries. I don't want to belittle anything, but I try to always put a positive spin on everything. The glass is
Right.
half full, it's not half empty. I
Hmm.
always find a solution and move forward because I'm not going to be negative for my son or for anybody's kids. So that's where I think I've become tough.
Yeah.
Like, even I was in the room during all his surgeries at Scripps, in the
Yeah.
room, shining the light over the open hole in his stomach because it was in his hospital room and they didn't have bright light. Am I phased by it? No. When I
Wow.
saw him turning gray, I'm, screaming out the door, get in here, he's coding, because he wasn't connected to anything because we had him try to walk down the hall and they wasn't connected for them to know that he was coding. So
My
he's
gosh.
blue, sitting in a chair. So I got him in the bed, screamed at all the doctors, got, all the doctors and nurses in there, and they did a fantastic job. But it was 3 days of poking around to try and find to stop the bleeding. But this is a thing telling the parents to be aggressive from the day they're born.
Huh.
And realizing they have to step up because the kid won't survive otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, I can see why you got all these awards. I mean, you it's this amazing. So why do you think with all these services, why is it so hard to find them? Is it a lack of marketing or where's the ball getting
Well,
dropped?
these government agencies have no marketing. Then they're
No.
so overwhelmed with regular people, just like people lining up, turning 65, getting services. The disabilities area is people don't think about it. And especially if someone doesn't have a kid with disabilities, that is out of sight, out of mind. They don't think about it. So it's really important. For example, like Tyler got the job at Cox that that father happened to have a child with disabilities, or they wouldn't even think that way. The whole of Cox Communications about people with disabilities, regular people too, but giving them an opportunity.
Hmm.
Same thing with Options for All. So it's a lot of areas that I find if they've had nothing to do with people with disabilities, don't care. Government agencies don't market well. They're overwhelmed. They're short staffed. And I'm talking about IHSS, Medicare, Medi-Cal, all of them. If the person picking up the phone doesn't have a kid with disabilities, it's
Yeah.
not really in the front of their mind.
Uh-huh.
So that's why with me, I always say I want one big cohesive approach. And I tell each of the agencies I work with, hey, I work with this one, this one, this one, this one. And you're going to talk to this one and this one because each of you are doing something to provide the overall holistic care for this person. And
Hmm.
they appreciate it. They all, send emails backwards and forwards to one another. This is what needs to happen. I've sent the CalAble representative to Terry last week to present. I
Yeah.
sent her to the regional center to present. I've sent her up north to the other regional centers because it's about they should be doing this from a marketing standpoint and reaching out, but they're not because
Totally.
they just go do their job and go home. Go do their job, go home. And even the social security relationships, I've built those relationships. So once you have a person at social security, for example, try to keep that relationship. Try to keep the relationship with the IHSS person. They will change them from year to year, your contact.
Uh-huh.
Get their email and phone number. That's the golden thing. And stay in touch with them. Even if you just want to ask a dumb question, stay in touch with them because there's so much with rules and regulations. You can read it and not understand it. And you want to make sure you're doing all the right things at the right time. But when he was born, that's when I realized, ooh, this is going to impact school, the regional center, IEPs, the right schooling and classes. Like, for example, little things that shocker. He was diploma bound, and they suddenly said, no, he can't graduate now. It's going to be a certificate. And I said, well, why? Well, a few years ago, there was the whole Common Core thing with education, and a lot of
Hmm.
teachers hated it. And you being special ed involved in education, you probably remember this. There was a lot of pushback with Common Core, especially on the disability side.
Hmm.
They There was a specific algebra class that had to be taken to graduate. Well, a lot of schools in Southern California, some of them had this class in fundamentals, they call it. Fundamentals is a scaled down curriculum for that particular class for kids with disabilities. There were a lot of schools that didn't offer it. That, even though they'd done all the other credits to graduate, this one
Hmm.
class was stopping them from graduating because the school didn't offer it. So I went to a school that had that curriculum, had that program, went back to the schools with it and the contact, and I said, you're completely being discriminatory or completely not caring. I said, here's the schools that have this program, this algebra, fundamentals, common core program for kids with disabilities. And if they do it, they can graduate if they've got all the credits. Why don't you have it? So the special ed teacher said, wow, this is way above our pay grade. And I said, well, do you mind if I go over you?
Yeah.
So I let him know nicely, diplomatically. So I went around him and over them, all the way up to the principals, the supervisor for the education department in the district. And I said, you just need to merge this in to the classes because the other schools have already done it. And if you're one of these top schools in Southern California, why don't you have it? And you're changing these kids' lives. You're going to be throwing them into the alternative transitional program when they don't belong there. They should be in community college. So you are really, really screwing up their path when they come out of school and you're putting them 2 years behind. And if a kid with disabilities goes into a community college with a certificate, they have to make up 200 credits to get their GED, and that can take 2 or 3 years. So you just push them back in their career
Hmm.
at least 2 years. That's terrible.
Hmm.
Anyway, I got the schools to implement the new math curriculum, and these kids graduated. And parents didn't even know this was an issue. So I know some kids that got stuck, didn't go into the class, didn't have a diploma, they were certificate bound, and these kids should not have been in the transition program. And they'll say to
Yeah.
me they felt like they were in jail because they weren't a fit for that program. School cares? No. It's, I would say you've got to be, and I was a single mom through all of this too. So there's a lot of
Wow.
stuff you have got to build up around you. I had a good nanny,
Yeah.
but she didn't handle any of the medical or any of that. And because I was commuting to London and Paris for work, for software and all that, and I'd come home, forget work, I'm mom instantly,
Uh-huh.
instantly. Like, okay, and I live and die by my calendar. What appointments do I have? All of that sort of thing. So it is work, but once you've reached out to these agencies and they're all working together in the background, you've got a better support system for your kid.
Start finding some flow. What was the biggest obstacle you faced with the schools?
Sometimes fighting for more services for a kid that they didn't want to or they didn't feel because they're testing, they didn't see it. And I'm like, well, you're not a doctor and you're not a neuropsych. And so I would always tell the parents, go get this. We go back and fight them again. And I usually always got what I wanted for the family, for the kid. That's the biggest challenge, is being denied anything. So that's why you have to have all the medical behind you, because again, the school only has therapists. They don't have a neuropsych neurologist doing the eval, a psych eval, even though a school would do a psych eval. The one from a neurologist at a hospital is a way more in depth and higher level. That usually trumps what the school does.
I see. Yeah, yeah. So, what's a day in the life now look like for Tyler and for you?
Oh boy. I've been up since the crack of dawn working with my clients this morning.
Yeah.
A day in the life is literally, what appointments does he have every week?
Uh-huh.
And like, we were at his foot surgeon a couple of days ago, custom orthotics appointment yesterday for an hour and a half with custom orthotics. Now we have to research all the different types of sneakers that he can wear or buy. We have to go
Jeez.
find them because not all of them work. And there's a million sneakers, but he can't wear them all because we're trying to put off foot surgery, another foot surgery, for as long as we can. So that, and then like on Monday, he has 3 cardiac appointments because he also, beyond the bicuspid aortic valve and the coarctation that was repaired, he also has a grossly dilated aneurystic left subclavian, which means it could burst anytime. That's the main aortic vein that goes up here and takes blood up to the upper part of your body. His left one is very grossly dilated, huge. It could burst, it'd be death. We have to monitor it and we have to measure it, a couple of times a year, because, it's going to grow when he grows. We had to really watch it to see that as he grew, it didn't grow disproportionately or too quickly or too slow. So we have a baseline. That's the other thing I tell parents. Stay up to date on all your medical, whether it be blood work or imaging, because
Hmm.
doctors want baseline to see what's happening. You don't go once in 6 years and go, well, this is what's happening. They have no baseline to know what to do for you. So we do that, and he'll have all the various imaging. And then in a couple of days, we just did all the blood work at the hospital. He sees his nephrologist in a couple of days as well because of the horseshoe kidneys. So it's being proactive for whatever medical parts so nothing dire happens. And if we need surgery, we can plan it. And we've already researched the right doctors to know who's the right one. A couple of years ago, he had the same abdominal surgery, but with Tyler, I'm so dubious he's got things in the wrong place in his body, so nothing would surprise me. And he had blood and urine coming out of his navel. And we're like, what the heck is this? So I go back to the nephrologist, I go back to the abdominal surgeon. We did imaging, and it showed he had this thing called a urachal cyst behind the navel. A urachus is when a baby's in utero, the baby feeds, pees, and poops through the urachal canal. And that usually disappears after a baby's born. That's nature. That's how it should work. Well, my son, no, it didn't. At 27 years old, it decided to turn into a giant urachal cyst, huge behind his navel. And
Ugh.
the imaging didn't show us connected to anything. And I said, well, you can't really see behind his bladder in the imaging. So I want the nephrologist on standby in the operating room when you open him up. And when they opened him up, there it was, connected to the bladder. And if we didn't
Wow.
have that nephrologist there and then to work with the abdominal surgeon, they would have been scrambling, and maybe they got a nephrologist that's not familiar with my son.
Uh-huh.
So everything is, I would say, is be proactive.
Yeah, you have to be. So with all this, all the news and all the unknown of every day, I mean, you kind of have to operate off of his appointments and all that, and then you fit in all of his other stuff. How do you handle all the news? What do you do to keep charged? Play pickleball or something?
Luckily, I have a loving family, a wonderful husband. Daughter's actually in PA school because she took the whole
Okay.
medical route because of Tyler, I think, because of the genetics.
Uh-huh.
I go to the gym, I work out. Something that's completely not connected to this is, I don't know if you're familiar with Del Mar.
Yeah.
Sandag, which is the big transportation company down here, wants to demolish Del Mar and basically put a tunnel and a train through and under the entire length of Del Mar. So I started a coalition for safer trains. And
Because you have so much time.
my husband's ready to kill me on it. But so I reach out to the congressmen and senators and have one-on-one meetings with CEO Sandag. And last July, I really screwed them up because they had a short list, which didn't include any citizens. It was just rail stakeholder short list, which means we have no say, even though our taxes pay for transportation. And I screwed them up. And my alignment, which I worked with engineers. I learned about tunnel design. I learned about freight trains, what they can and can't do, speed, alignments, soil, erosion, you name it. I came up with an alignment and made it into the short list of three. That really screwed up Sandag because they were like, oh my God, because BNSF is the powerhouse freight train company down here, which is Buffett's company. And it's all about freight. It's not about the citizens. They don't care if they put an offensive train, which is through Del Mar on the cliffs, but they're eroding. They have to move them inland.
Yeah.
So anyway, I constantly meet with the congressmen and the policymakers, Blake Spear, Sandag, and because of me screwing them up in July, they went dark for the last 7 months, making new alignments. They came out with from a short list of three, they just came out with 16 alignments. So I said, hey, we need a meeting on this. What have you been doing for 7 months? And
Yeah.
because I complained and came up with other alignments, 2 days later, they came up with a new short list of five. And I'm like, where did these come from? They didn't go through the 7 months environmental study of the 16, and now you have five. So right now I'm working with my group that I built. I have a website called safertrain.org, and we've
Wow.
updating our alignment again, a new alignment that the problem is they want to have a portal in the north end of Del Mar, an eminent domain, 50 homes, take them,
Huh.
destroy 50
Jeez.
homes. And the south end of Del Mar, same thing with the portal pops up. The portal's huge,
Yeah.
and people are going to be dying of the health impacts of the because trains are the second biggest polluter in the world behind planes, and they're going to fit eminent domain and take 50 homes at the south end of Del Mar. So that's 100 homes. Last time I checked, we have a housing crisis. Let's demolish 100 homes,
Gosh.
and then they want to triple the number of trains from 44 passenger trains to 111 per day, and from four freight trains to 16 per day. So that's triple the pollution wafting through our communities. So I came up with another alignment which involves only using public land, taking infrastructure out of the lagoons, no eminent domain, and for Sandag to lower their mandate of 110 miles per hour. I'm like, you're going to blow through towns at 110 miles per hour. The fairgrounds here wants their own event platform, which is just for them, but they only want the tunneling and devastation to happen in Del Mar. They don't want any of it. And yet that's public property. Anyway, I've got a new alignment that I've created. We're working on all the video, drone footage, updating the website, meeting with all the policymakers because a new notice of preparation is coming out in May from Sandag. And we're presenting our alternative, which is a new Northern Yellow Line route, which doesn't affect anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 45 days to respond. So we're doing that right now to prepare. And I
Jeez.
have congressmen here at the House. I have Jim Desmond coming to the House in a couple of weeks. It's ongoing.
Do you
So
sleep?
no, that's what my husband's like. Oh my God, you're not sleeping. And I'm like, I'm up at 5 a.m. working because the brain's tick, 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 tick.
Yeah.
I'm trying to delegate.
Okay.
I have
Okay.
many special ed teachers actually that want me to train them into what I do, but I don't even know where to begin. So I
Yeah.
am a one man show. It's very hard, but
Is
I
there
have great.
other are there more of you out there?
No, they don't mix all the stuff I'm mixing. They only
Mm-hmm.
do IEPs.
Yeah.
But I'm like, how can you only do that piece? If the kid's got disabilities, then you need to know the agencies to help the parents to get them set up with the agencies.
Right.
It's only one little point, and that's how it's grown because it upsets me when the families weren't informed or they've missed so much money, like they took years to get the kid up on a social security
Uh-huh.
because they didn't know. And I'm like, you know, the money's not retroactive. You can't get it,
It's gone.
right?
Yeah. Wow. What are some of the biggest victories for Tyler? I mean, his
Okay.
film career is impressive.
Yeah, his video film career is impressive. He's actually meeting with a couple of golf companies because Cobra, Titleist, Callaway are all down
Yeah.
here. He wants to
Yeah.
work in their media and marketing departments,
Okay.
which would be amazing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.